All right, let's go ahead and continue reading the message. I'm at the second paragraph. The code comes from you, all of you, as you perceive yourself now, but that is you. So when he's saying you in this sentence, he's talking about all of us. He's not talking Regina. I think sometimes this is one of the mistakes we make when we start listening to these kinds of teachings, is when we hear the word you, we think me, the individual. He's not talking about me, the individual, right? He's talking about our oneness. He says, the code comes from you, all of you, as you perceive yourself now, but that is you. The code that most directly influences you in the experience as an individual is the code that most directly comes from you. But all code influences upon each other, so that no true separation in code can be determined. It is really important to accept that there is no separation, and this is always true and always reflected within the code. So he's really talking about something that's a bit of a paradox, but as we awaken, we learn that truth is full of paradoxes, right? He's really talking about, as a seeming individual, right? You know, as a Regina, me, and not Laurent, you know, someone who seems separate, as a seeming individual, I have choices. And the choices I make are most definitely going to affect my perception and my experience. But at the same time, he doesn't want me to start thinking of myself as separate. He says, at the same time, the choices you make affect everyone and everything, and their choices affect you. So you're most directly affected by your choices in perception. But at the same time, your choices in perception are a part of the totality, and you cannot separate that. I'm just going to read this paragraph again and then move into the next paragraph. The code comes from you, all of you as you perceive yourself now, but that is you. The code that most directly influences you in the experience as an individual is the code that most directly comes from you, the seeming individual. But all code influences upon each other, so that no true separation in code can be determined. It is really important to accept that there is no separation, and this is always true and always reflected within the code. Okay, third paragraph. The code makes illusion. As long as you experience any degree of illusion, you experience the code. And you always experience the totality of the code, although the code can be experienced differently. This is because the code is a layered code, and the layers are different vibrational levels of the same basic code. Add to that the phenomenon of an individual scripted interpretation, and the code seems to have a myriad of different angles, but it is all one code. This is very similar to the idea of the script in A Course in Miracles. It's also very similar to the idea of karma, especially as karma is taught through Inner Ramana. And what we are really being told here is that this is a pretty complicated formula. And when we sit down with our human mind and try to understand the formula, we're really going about something that's just kind of ridiculous. But there is a written script or a written karma or a written code, whatever you want to call it. And within that, there are a myriad of possibilities and a myriad of ways to perceive what is written. So, although the Course teaches that the script is written, right, this does not mean that you do not have free will. You know, people sometimes say, is it destiny or is it free will? Well, It's both. It's actually both. They work together to create the script. They work together to create the script. And what we're going to see as we go through the code is what part of it is destiny and what part of it is free will, and how free will affects destiny. So again, the code is a layered code with different vibrational levels within the same basic code. And then there's also individual scripted interpretation, which is the way we choose to perceive it. And that makes the code somewhat complicated. All right, going on to the next paragraph. Individual scripted interpretation also comes from the code. And this is pretty important, at least it was for me. Pretty important in order for me to allow hatred to die. Individual scripted interpretation also comes from the code. This facet of the code comes into the mind as your thoughts, your feelings, and your reactions. It is an interpretation of shared events, and your reaction or belief about individual interpreted code adds to the overall writing of total code and total experience. Okay. So what this is really saying is that in a particular moment, you know, when you drop a brick on your toe, for example, the thought that comes bam into your mind when you drop that brick on your toe. Oh, good night, Laurence. I love you. Okay, so the thought that comes into your mind, bam, when you drop that brick on your toe, is a part of the code. Whether you think shit, or whether you panic, or whether you just say, oh, wow, I dropped a brick on my toe. That is scripted. That is already a part of the code, already a part of the script. You cannot change the thoughts that come into your mind. And at the same time, when the thought comes into your mind, you have an opportunity to choose a perception of that thought. And the perception you choose adds to the writing of the code. It's a part of the overall writing. So, for example, if you drop a brick on your toe, and the thought that comes into your mind is shit, and let's say it's not only shit, it's shit, why did so-and-so leave these things laying around where they could fall on my toe? You have this automatic grievance. It comes into your mind. Boom. If you choose to fully believe that, then that is going to write the experience that's going to follow for you. But if the thought comes into your mind and you actually choose not to fully believe the thought, even though it's there, even though the pain is there, you choose not to fully believe it. You choose, for example, and this is exactly the way I did it, you choose to remember this is just code. Then your experience that's going to follow is going to be different. It's going to be written differently. So there's two things going on. One is destiny and one is free will, and they're almost so simultaneous you cannot separate them. The destiny is the thought that came into your mind. There's no way you could not have had that thought in that moment. There's no way you could not have had that thought in that moment. That was destiny. But you still have a choice in perception, a choice in belief. That is free will. And based on what you choose with your free will, your experience that follows is going to be written into the code differently. All right, so let's look at this again. Individual scripted interpretation also comes from the code, the thought that comes in. This facet of the code comes into the mind as your thoughts, your feelings, and your reactions. Whatever happened in that moment when you dropped that brick on your toe was automatic. It is an interpretation of shared events and your reaction or belief about individual interpreted code, so how you choose to look at that thought and that automatic reaction, adds to the overall writing of the total code and the total experience. So again, if I drop a brick on my toe, the thought comes in, some thought of damn shit, and then let's say it's even followed by a thought of blame for somebody leaving those bricks around, right? So this is somebody's fault for making me do this work, whatever. I have a very quick opportunity to fully believe that, not fully believe that, judge myself for having that automatic reaction, not judge myself for having that automatic reaction. These are called choices in perceptions. And my choice in perception is going to be a part of the code that follows. So yes, the automatic reaction is code. And the reason this is so helpful, okay, at least for me, maybe I'm the only person on earth that can benefit from this. But the reason this was so helpful is, again, the thoughts that were coming into my mind about Laurent were, there were a lot of them. They were very hateful, and there seemed to be a lot of proof around, a lot of proof of these thoughts. And after I learned and accepted the message of the code, what would happen is, I would walk into the bedroom and I'd see Laurent's underwear laying all over the floor, and I would see drawers open, with his clothes hanging out of the drawers, and the hate was boom, right there. You understand, there wasn't a damn thing I could do about that. It was so fast. As soon as my eyes landed on the scene, the hate was there. Boom. But what I learned from the code was that although I couldn't stop the automatic reaction, I could now choose my perception of my own automatic reaction. I could choose to say, that was code. And that's exactly what I did. That was code. I could choose to say, I do not want to fully believe this code because I want to be free, really because I wanted to be free of the hate. And if I fully believe the code, then it's going to be a complete driver of my experience, and I will never be free of the hate. So I couldn't stop the automatic reactions, but I could not judge myself for the automatic reaction. I could remember that it's just code, that I had no control over it, and I could choose not to take it so seriously. I could do that. And that was the beginning of new code, new automatic reactions.